Any senators wish to vote or change their vote? On this vote, the yeas are 43, the nays are 56. The amendment is not adopted.
Mr. President.
Can we have order, Mr. President?
Mr. President.
Senate will be in order. Senate will be in order.
Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that Senator Leahy be recognized for 3 minutes. And then I would say to my colleagues, I'm going to use my leader time to make a final statement, and then we'll be ready for the final vote.
Is there objection? Without objection, Senator from Vermont.
Do you want to go first, Mitch? Mitch? Mr. President, I thank the distinguished Majority Leader for his courtesy. Be very brief. We worked for 2 years across the aisle, actually across the Capitol. I know. We have order.
The Senate will be in order. Senator from Vermont.
We worked for 2 years across the aisle and across the Capitol. I don't know how many meetings Senator Lee and I and others have had. And now the Senate is finally poised to pass our USA Freedom Act and send it to the President for his signature. It brings much-needed reform to the government surveillance authorities. It'll end the bulk collection of Americans' phone records. It'll increase transparency. It'll improve oversight. Most importantly, help restore Americans' privacy, all the while ensuring our intelligence community has what they need. I'm proud to have done this. I have fought to protect the privacy and constitutional rights of Vermonters and all Americans since 1975, when I cast my first ever vote as a senator to approve the establishment of the Church Committee. I'll continue to fight for Americans' privacy. I ask consent my full statement be made part of the record.
Without objection.
Mr. President.
The Majority Leader of the Senate.
I'm going to now proceed on my leader time.
Without objection. The Senate will be in order. The Majority Leader.
Mr. President, earlier this year, I observed that President Obama's national security policy has been noteworthy for its consistent objectives. He's been very consistent. Drawing down our conventional and nuclear forces, withdrawing from Iraq and Afghanistan, ending the tools developed by the previous administration to wage the war on terror, and placing a greater reliance upon international organizations and diplomacy. That's been the hallmark of the Obama foreign policy. None of this is a surprise. The President ran in 2008 as the candidate who would end the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and the war on terror. And our nation has a regrettable history of drawing down our forces and capabilities after each conflict, only to find ourselves ill-prepared for the next great struggle. The bookends to the President's policies were the executive orders signed his very first week in office, which included the declaration that Guantanamo would be closed within a year without any plan for what to do with its detainees, and the executive orders that ended the Central Intelligence Agency's detention and interrogation programs. Now, some of these detainees, my colleagues, some of them are now in Qatar, preparing to rejoin the Taliban. Some are in Uruguay, camped out in a park across from the American embassy. And regrettably, some are back on the battlefield in Yemen, Afghanistan, and Syria. Other hallmarks of the Obama foreign policy. And last year, the President announced that all of our combat forces would be withdrawn from Afghanistan by the end of his term in office, whether or not the Taliban were successful in capturing parts of Afghanistan, whether or not al-Qaeda senior leadership had found a more permissive environment in the tribal areas in Pakistan, and whether or not al-Qaeda has been completely driven from Afghanistan. So I'll repeat, the pattern is clear. The President has been a reluctant commander-in-chief. And between those two bookends, my colleagues, much has occurred that has undermined our national security. There was the failure to negotiate a status of forces agreement with Iraq that would have allowed for a residual military force and prevented the assault by the Islamic State of Syria and the Levant. China is aggressively expanding its sphere of influence. There's a threat to veto funding for the troops. We just heard it from the minority leader. And their equipment without similar increases at the IRS and the EPA. Let me say that again. The President's threatening to veto the defense bill unless we increase the funding for IRS and EPA. Now, this is going to diminish our military's ability to respond to the myriad threats that are facing us today, and we all know what they are. Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula has doggedly pursued tactics and capabilities to circumvent all that we've done since September the 11th, 2001, to defend our country. So while the President has inflexibly clung to campaign promises made in 2008, the threat from al-Qaeda has metastasized around the world. ISIL, which is broken from al-Qaeda, uses social media to communicate with Americans, divert them to encrypted communications, encourage travel to the would-be caliphate, and encourage attacks right here at home. Al-Qaeda and ISIL publish online magazines instructing individuals in terrorist tactics. And in the long run, the al-Nusra Front in Syria may present the greatest long-term threat to our homeland. The President's efforts to dismantle our counterterrorism tools have not only been inflexible, they are especially ill-timed. And so today the Senate will vote on whether or not we should take one more tool away from those who defend this country every day. The ability of a trained analyst under exceedingly close supervision and only with the approval of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court to query a database of call data records based on reasonable, articulable suspicion. No content, no names, no listening to phone calls of law-abiding citizens. None of that is going on. We're talking about call data records. And these are the provider's records, which is not what the Fourth Amendment speaks to. It speaks to the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects. But these records belong to the phone companies. And let me remind the Senate, the standard for reasonable, articulable suspicion is that the terror suspect is associated with a, quote, foreign terrorist organization, end quote, as determined by a court. Nobody's civil liberties are being violated here. The President's campaign to destroy the tools used to prevent another terrorist attack has been aided by those seeking to prosecute officers in the intelligence community, diminish our military capabilities, and despicably to leak and reveal classified information, putting our nation further at risk. Those who reveal the tactics, sources, and methods of our military and intelligence community give a playbook to ISIL and to al-Qaeda. As the Associated Press declared today, the end of Section 215 program is a, quote, this is the headline in the AP today, a resounding victory for Edward Snowden. A resounding victory for Edward Snowden. It is also a resounding victory for those who currently plotted against our homeland. Where was the defense of the National Security Agency from our president? Our chairman of the Intelligence Committee and his committee colleagues have worked with determination to educate the Senate concerning the legal, technical, and oversight safeguards currently in place. We hear concerns about public opinion. A CNN poll released today, just today, a CNN poll, this is not exactly part of the right-wing conspiracy, states that 61% of Americans think that the expiring provisions of the Patriot Act, including, my colleagues, including data collection, should be renewed. So if there's widespread concern out across America about privacy, we're not picking it up. They're not reporting it to CNN. 61% of them say, I'm not concerned about my privacy, I'm concerned about my security. So my view is that the determined effort to fulfill campaign promises by the president back in 2008 reflects an inability to adapt to the current threat, what we have right now. An inflexible view of past political grievances, a policy that will leave the next president in a weaker position to combat ISIL. So, Mr. President, I cannot support passage of the so-called USA Freedom Act. It does not enhance the privacy protections of American citizens, and it surely undermines American security by taking one more tool from our war.
Democratic leader.
President. My friend, the majority leader, if he's concerned, as he should be, about why the country is less secure, especially in the last couple of weeks, he should look in the mirror. We have a situation where he's tried to divert attention from what has gone on here. It was as if there had been a big neon sign flashing saying, you can't do highway reauthorization, you can't do FISA reauthorization, and you can't do trade in 4 or 5 days. To do this right, we should have spent some time on FISA. And because of the mad rush to do trade, that didn't happen. So today, to try to divert attention from what I believe has been a miscalculation of the majority leader that's making this country less safe, every day that goes by with the FISA bill not being reauthorized is a bad day for our country. Makes us less safe. And to try to divert attention, as he's tried to do here in the last few minutes, blaming the Obama administration for stopping torture, the detention centers, pulling troops out of Iraq. I say, my friends, looking in the wrong direction. So, Mr. President, the issue before us is not to be, and he is, in effect, criticizing the House of Representatives for passing this FISA bill to reauthorize it in a way that's more meaningful to the American people and makes us more safe. It makes us so that people feel more secure about the intelligence operation we have going on in this country. Is he criticizing the Speaker for working hard to get this bill reauthorized in a fashion that the American people accept? Because his criticism here today is not directed to people who voted here today. It's directed to the bipartisan efforts in the House of Representatives, who passed this bill overwhelmingly, 338 votes. One of the few bipartisan things they've done over there, and they did it for the security of this nation. So I don't think any of us, Mr. President, need a lecture on why we're less secure today than we were a few days ago. So I would hope that everyone would vote to continue the surveillance opportunity, surveillance possibilities that we have available if this law passes. If it doesn't pass, what are we going to do? It will go to the House of Representatives. The majority leader of the House of Representatives, the distinguished House member from California, Ms. McCarthy, said they don't want anything from us. They want this bill passed. They want USA Freedom Bill passed today. Goodlatte, the chairman of the Judicial Committee, that's what he said. And of course, that's what the Democratic leader says over there also. So, Mr. President, let's vote. And a vote today to pass this bill will make our country safer immediately, not a week from now. That's estimated how long it would take, at the minimum, if this bill is changed when it goes to the House. I'm sorry, if it doesn't go to the President directly, and it should go directly from here to the President of the United States, he can sign this in a matter of hours and put us back on a more secure footing to protect ourselves from the bad guys around the world.
Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
As my good friend, the Majority Leader, frequently reminded me over the last few years, the Majority Leader always gets the last word. And look, his fundamental complaint is he doesn't get to schedule the Senate anymore, and he wanted to kill the President's trade bill. And so he didn't like the fact that we moved to the trade bill early enough before the opposition to it might become more severe. So I'd say to my good friend, the Majority Leader, you don't get to set the schedule anymore. And my observations about the President's foreign policy are directly related to the vote we're about to cast. And it remains my view, I know there are differences of opinion, and I respect everybody in here who has a different opinion, that this bill is a part of a pattern going back to the time the President took office to pull back. I remember the speech in Cairo back in 2009 to the Muslim world, which sought to question the American exceptionalism. Well, we're all just pretty much alike. If we just talk to each other more, everything would be okay. And so in almost every measurable way, all the places that I listed, plus Ukraine, you name them, we've been pulling back. And so my view, with regard to my position and my vote, is that this is a step in the wrong direction. But I respect the views of others, and I suspect the Majority Leader will be happy at the end of the day. It appears to me the votes are probably there to pass this bill, and it will go to the President, and I still think it's a step backward from where we are. It's been a great debate. I respect all of those who have engaged in it on both sides. I think it's time to vote. I yield the floor.